Welcome to the Be Empowered podcast with your host, Graeme Hopkins. My goal is to help you regain your power by bridging the gap between who you think you are right now and who you really are. In simple language, that is like making your childhood dreams come true. This is for those who want to make an impact in their lives but don't know how to get there. Be ensured, when you know and feel connected to your spiritual mind, you master your world.
Hey, thanks for joining us today, everyone. My name's Graeme Hopkins. I'm your host of Be Empowered podcast. Today we're going to do something a little different. Since this is the first show in the Be Empowered podcast series, I'm asking a good friend of mine, Jeff Steinman, to interview me so that I can just outline briefly what it is to be empowered. So I'd like to introduce you to Jeff Steinman of How to Quit Working.
Graeme, thanks for having me on the show.
It's going to be a good time, Jeff.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
Shall we burrow into what it is to be empowered?
Yeah, let's jump right into it. Graeme, I'd like to first hear about what led you on this journey to discover what it means to be empowered and what it means to live a life the way that you believe we should and can live life.
Well, it's been a long journey, Jeff, going back probably 25 to 30 years. And I've learnt a lot on that journey, which has brought me to this point in time where I'm starting to start this podcast so that I can share what I've learnt during that time. So science has come up with a term these days called cognitive dissonance. And dissonance means disharmony. So a few days ago I had a look at what the definition of that was, and this is what it is. It's a discrepancy between the beliefs that are integral to our self-identity and our behaviour. So what happens is that when things don't match up in our life, a couple of things happen. One is that we feel discomfort. If that continues, we can actually go into stress about it, because it's almost like we're feeling like a hypocrite. We believe something deep down in our heart, and yet our actions don't line up with that. And when I was younger, I was a very dysfunctional person, and because one of my gifts, I guess, is that I have a real yearning for truth. So I knew that I wasn't lining up with that, and I knew I had to change. So it was a matter of a journey of learning how to change my energy, how to change my intellect, and that has been really the journey that I've been on all that time.
That's fascinating stuff, and you know, the thing that it's so interesting that I hear you saying is that it's almost like because of the struggles that you faced, you found out that even though a lot of people in this world suffer and suffer a lot, you found that we know as a scientific community and as humanity, we know how to do it better, and that's what you've sort of figured out. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, totally. I guess it came to a head in around about 2003, where I'd lost my full-time employment, and you know from How to Quit Working what that feels like. You know, you feel valueless, I guess, and not worthy, because I basically had a job for 27 years with one employer, and that airline went broke, and in 2001. Well, I didn't have work for probably 15 months, and towards the end of that time, I mean, it was a very stressful time, and I guess I'm not a person who really experiences depression, but if there was a time in my life when I was depressed, then 2003 was it. And I went on a camping trip with a friend, and as I jumped in the passenger seat of his four-wheel drive, there was a book on the seat, and I picked it up, and I never put it down. It was an amazing book. It's called How to Stop the Pain, and really that changed all my all my thinking. It really changed my belief system, and then it was a matter of starting to learn how to implement that into my life. Because you see, what happens a lot with a lot of people is that they're in search of the truth. So, you know, they're going to seminars and they're reading books, but the truth is that they don't implement it. So I took this one book and I studied what this author was saying. I listened to an awful lot of audios, and I started to take it inside of myself. So it became a part of my subconscious mind. So it started to become a natural thing to me. So yeah, that was probably one of the biggest transitions that I made, that has led me to this stage where I'm now coaching others, and now going on to a podcast where I can make it a broader reach.
Yeah, well, what were maybe some specific changes that you made after reading that book in 2003 that really helped you to live a very different life?
I was in a how can I say it? I was in a mode of trying to become, and what this teacher really hit home was that I already am. So I had to learn to kind of bring that together, and I started to realize there was a gap between where I am, or where I was then, and who I really was. So it's a matter of learning how to...
Cognitive dissonance then.
Totally. So I had to learn to start to come to the awareness that I could become who I really was.
How?
Well, it's really, really simple, but it takes time. It's not something you can change overnight, because basically from childhood we've started to create this gap. So when we're born, if you like, we're actually one. It's probably the time when we're the closest to being one with a higher intelligence than we are for the rest of our life, because we have no expectations, and we have no division going on between our body, soul and spirit. So it's a matter of actually in some ways going back and picking up on that vision that we all have as a child. I mean, can I ask you, Jeff, did you have a vision that you had as a child that you're now starting to live.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the more authentically I live my life, it seems to me the more uh, I am kind of more like I imagined as a child.
Yeah. So the thing is that when young children are in their natural connected state, in their oneness, if you like, they are imagining a lot. And then what happens? You know, we go to school and the school teacher says, stop daydreaming. And in the old days, they used to whack them with a stick. You know, that's not allowed anymore, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And so young children are actually taught not to connect with themselves and not feel at one with themselves. And so basically what I do when I coach is that I help people see who they really are and then help them to connect with that greatness, that goodness that they've become dissociated from.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, Graham, you have a couple of kids, and they're grown, and it's interesting as you were talking about it, it's almost like you say that kids are really good the way they are. They know what they want. They're very one. They're at peace, and they're centered, and they're at one with their true self. But then it's our culture and our society that takes them off of that path. What would you advise to parents out there who have small children to help them to stay on that right path? Because it seems to me like it would be easier if we just stayed on that same path that we are naturally as children.
Well, for a start, we have 4 children, and the youngest one is now 20, and it's a thrill to look back and just see, what they're doing with their lives, because let me tell you that we homeschooled our 4 children. Well, mainly my wife because of my work duties, but Susanna did a great job of homeschooling the children. And I think one thing that I can suggest that parents should be doing is to determine what the child desires to do in their life. So it's not the parent trying to force onto the child what their dreams are or what they missed out on. It's determining what is natural for the child and what their desires are. And Jeff, we made a lot of mistakes as a parent, but I think what we got right is that we enabled our children to do what they wanted to do. And we have 4 children, and they all learnt music right from 5 years old, and that's what they major on these days. We have 2 sons running a music school in Perth. We have our daughter who teaches at the school, and she's also doing natural medicine. She's studying natural medicine, and she's very much in tune with this work. So Rachel and I actually work together at Be Empowered. And then we have another son who's presently in Greece. He's there for 8 months at the moment. He's writing music, plays guitar and sings. So his album will be released in December this year. So, we've never had any real problems with our kids. And the reason is that we learnt from an early stage to respect them. Even when they were young, we respected who they were and then nurtured them to become their dream, become their desire.
Now that is a radical departure from traditional parenting. I mean, traditional parenting is all about taking that child and molding them into what our society tells us they should be, and acting the way they should be, and doing the sensible and the safe things. Pursuing a career in music is not safe. That's not the financially safe route, but it is the route that's most genuine and authentic to, it sounds like, who your kids are. And that's amazing that you've been able to create the four new human beings in this world who are not following the broken pattern of going and getting a job and doing something that you don't like. And the element that you add on to that, beyond what I normally talk about on my show, is also being one with who they really are. And that's really exciting. But I think that the situation that you're out to address with your show and with your book and your coaching is adults who unfortunately have already gone down that path and are now looking to sort of get back to, who am I really, and what am I really about, and how can I really live a happy, peaceful life, and do it authentically. What would you say is somebody who's out there listening and they're saying, I totally get this, right? Because I always felt like I should be going this way, but the course of my life has gone this way, and that can mean in a lot of different ways: career, the way you act, the way you are, your hobbies, whatever it may be, your relationships. How does one go about, when they're already well into life, maybe in their 30s, 40s, 50s, or 60s, how does one go about getting back onto that track of oneness with who he or she really is?
Yeah. Well, Jeff, there's a lot of dysfunction out there. And what my Be Empowered group teaching is all about is congruency. What I mean by that is being congruent between our body, our soul, and our spirit. So I've basically come down, over many years, I've come down to three main tenets that Be Empowered is all about. So these are three tenets of my teaching, and that is, number one, we're spiritual beings, and this is proven these days by quantum physicists. And the second one is, everybody is intricately connected. And the third one is that we are of more value and worth than we can ever imagine. So just to kind of explain those a little bit, there's a saying that's fairly well known these days, and it goes like this: we are not human beings having a spiritual experience, we are spiritual beings having a human experience. So, as I said, it's pretty much proven these days by quantum physicists that this is a reality. So the foundation of everything has to be that there's an intelligence beyond our own intelligence that we are connected to. And if we can't get that, we're going to have dysfunction. The second tenet is the law of entanglement in quantum physics states that the relationship is the defining characteristics of everything. Ultimately, it means that everything and everyone is intricately connected, and we all affect each other. Therefore, we are one. So, what I mean by this is that we are all connected spiritually. That is a reality. The illusion that people start believing, this gap, Jeff, that I talked about earlier, that says that we're separate from. And in that, we manifest dysfunction. Then the third one is, since we are, in essence, infinite spiritual beings, in other words, we're not just finite, we're infinite. We have this incredible value and worth attached to our identity. So identity takes a huge stage in this whole process of being empowered. Because, Jeff, it's who we really are that determines our identity.
How do we discover who we really are? What if we don't know, if we feel like we've become disconnected from that higher intelligence and disconnected from who we really are? How do we discover that?
Maybe the best way to kind of, this is going to be a little bit long-winded to
It's your show.
answer that question. However, yeah, I'll give you an analogy that I came across yesterday. Very powerful analogy, how all this works, Jeff. Yesterday I was in KL, Kuala Lumpur, in Malaysia, and I went along to the butterfly park there. And
You said the butterfly park?
butterfly park,
Okay.
which I'll just show you. This is for the people who are viewing this on video. Let me see if I can.
And if you're not on video, we'll have this picture below the show.
Yeah, so basically what I'm going to do, Jeff, is I want everybody to use their imagination, because what I'm going to describe is what I saw in this butterfly park, okay? But for those who can see it, that's the type of thing. Can you see that reasonably well?
Yeah.
Okay. So when I walked in there, what I saw was a huge netted area where they're keeping all these butterflies. And as I looked down, it was very impressive, because they had about 4 tiers going down towards the bottom, and they had waterfalls going down in many different directions down towards the bottom pond, and then it's obviously pumped back up and recirculated. But as you can see, Malaysia's totally tropical and beautiful. And I went down to the bottom there, Jeff, and I sat down, and it was like, it was huge for just sitting down and meditating, because you had this sound of the water, the greenery, and the butterflies flitting around. And as I sat there, I started to notice something. Most of the beautiful butterflies, the majority of them, were up the top of the net trying to get out. And as I went around taking photographs of the butterflies, I noticed that most of them were up on the top tier. And the significance of this is that they knew naturally that they were trapped, and they wanted to escape to something that they knew would be better. In other words, they wanted their freedom. Now, the reason this is really significant is that they weren't down around the waterfall and the beauty of that area. They weren't using it. They were too busy up trying to get out. And that probably goes on for days and days. Like I just read today that a butterfly actually only has a lifespan of between 2 and 11 months, depending on the breed. So here's what I saw. Another thing that I saw was there was just a few butterflies outside in the rainforest flying around in total freedom. Now, those butterflies have actually come from a cocoon. They've come out of the cocoon. They then live trapped in their environment, never being free. So the analogy is that most of us live a life like that. We never really experience freedom because we're too busy trying to get out of the cage that we have created for ourselves. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And it's such a powerful analogy when you think about those butterflies in that beautiful environment with the waterfalls and everything that you could imagine ever wanting as a butterfly, yet its sole focus in those limited few months that it has to live was figuring out a way to get to something else.
Yeah. So follow this now. I see the cocoon as being like the body. The environment which they're trapped in is like their soul. And outside where there's freedom is like our spirit. Now, we are connected to our spirit. The problem is that we don't perceive that we're connected to our spirit. And that's where all of our dysfunction comes from. All of it. It's a matter of perception.
What happens when we actually get connected with that spirit?
We move into the flow. So, for instance, I'm just watching on TV just before this call, Nadal playing at Wimbledon. Nadal, Federer, all these top-line players are in the flow. However, like some sportsmen that we know who were even #1 in the world, but yet their private life was in a mess, a lot of these players don't know that they can actually be in the flow in all other areas of the life other than the sport they play.
So they managed to get in flow with their sport, and I would imagine probably this happens with folks who get in the flow with their business or their career, but are completely out of flow in their personal life. And I imagine some people do it the opposite way as well.
Yeah. It's whatever we focus our attention on.
Well, and I imagine there's some people that are out of, I think most of us probably are out of flow in everything, personal life, professional life, and everything.
I'll tell you about my sons who play around the circuit in Perth. You know, quite often when I go back to Perth, I go and watch them play, and it just astounds me how a group can get together. And these guys have never played together, Jeff. And, okay, sometimes they get together and have a practice. Often they don't have time. They come together and it just happens. It is amazing. They just know they're connecting on a higher level than their soul area, their soul life. They're connecting on a higher level than their body. And it's just flowing. It just astounds me, you know. I sit there and you know, I just I say to myself, how do these guys do it?
That's awesome. It's it's interesting because everybody has that topic, that thing that they're passionate about and that they really believe in, and they like to, as I like to say, geek out about it, right? They like to just really watch it and study it and just really learn all about it, and that's really what you have done with this whole concept of getting connected with who you are and being the best person that you can be and who you authentically are. Graeme, what is, if we've got folks out there who are listening and they're saying, this sounds great and I want to do something, this is what I need in my life, what is one specific thing you would recommend that they do right now to get started?
Good question. There's a number of facets of this. One of the facets is energy, Jeff. And one of the people that I've really got a lot from in the line of energy is a lady called Donna Eden. And she's all about energy flow. So I'm an airline pilot. I understand energy flow. And I understand that the flow over the top of a wing and the energy that it provides is exactly the same as the energy around our body. So we actually, most people are, their energy is, it's not flowing.
Mm.
And so one of the first things that I did is I concentrated on getting my energy flowing. And Donna Eden is probably the world leading expert in that. So that's not everything, I don't believe, but it's a good start.
Excellent. Well, we'll link that up below. So, Graeme, this show is going to feature people who have already figured this out and they've had some success with implementing these ideas into their life in various things, like maybe it's dealing with an illness or dealing with any kind of challenge that could come up in life. Tell us a little bit about how is listening to this podcast going to help your listeners to better get in flow and become one with who they're authentically meant to be.
Okay, well, can I mention that I did an interview with Christine Phillips a few days ago, and she'll be featured on this podcast. Christine contracted cancer a year ago, and shortly after that, she read my ebook, The Manifesto of Your Inspirational Mind, and that had a significant impact on her life to the degree where she had no chemo. She had she basically just took the minimum amount of medical help, and the rest of the time she's worked on changing her identity, because our identity is how we define ourselves, and the reality is that we are people of extreme value. So value is a high up topic in everything that I teach. It's helping people see that they are valuable, to see that their spirit is goodness and greatness, and all they have to do is connect with it. That is really the bottom line behind Be Empowered. So, but before we wind up, Jeff, I'd just like to kind of summarise what Be Empowered is, because
Excellent.
It's a name that came to me inspirationally, and wasn't only me, it was Rachel, my daughter. We came up with this, but it's only in the last week that I've actually sat down, because I love the meaning of words. I love etymology, and a lot of my writing revolves around going right back to the root of a word to understand what that word means. For instance, I've written for years on the word matrix, and okay, it became a popular movie in 1999, but I just want to give a quote here, and this is a little bit going off track, but that word matrix actually means, the best definition is that it's the origin of something else. In other words, the woman's womb is the matrix of the of a child. That's where it was originated from. Yeah. Now, that word actually comes from Max Planck, who made a speech in 1944, and he's now known as the father of quantum physics. And this is what he said: all matter originates and exists only by virtue of a force which brings the particle of an atom to vibration and holds this most minute solar system of the atom together. We must assume behind this force is the existence of a conscious and intelligent mind. This mind is the matrix of all matter. Very powerful, because that's the way that I see it. That's probably my my core quote that I base everything on, because this is what quantum physics bases all their discoveries on. So basically, I went back and I started looking at the definition of being empowered, and what I noticed was that there's being empowered means different things to different people. And there's a lot of confusion around it. You know, what happens over time is our words have been twisted and distorted. And that's why I always go back to the original meaning of the word to try and work out what that word is actually saying. So these days, it can mean either power over something external, which leads to domination, manipulation, control or force, or it can mean power that comes from within. Now think about that. Go back to the birds. They're so intent on getting outside of the net area that they're missing everything within. And we tend to do the same. We try to create our identity outside of ourselves. So that could be the house we live in. It could be the partner we're with. It could be the money we're making. So many things. But we're not going in and connecting with the true identity that is within. I believe empowerment is the discovery of who we really are. And who we really are is our true identity. So I started looking up these words, and what I noticed was that what I'm talking about is more of a surrender to, whereas claiming power over something is claiming your rights and trying to enforce it. It's interesting that the word identity, it comes from the Latin word identitas, which means quality of being identical or the same. It actually means connection to, oneness, alignment, and congruence. Yet, somehow our identity is tied up with the uniqueness of that oneness. In other words, we're all unique, even though we're connected. Now, you can see that when people talk about an identity crisis, that's actually talking about separation. In other words, there's a separation going on. Here, this one, the gap. There's a separation going on between our spirit and our soul. So I then looked at the word empowered, and the synonyms there is to qualify, enable, equip, emancipate, unshackle, set free, liberate, discharge, and unchain. Isn't that amazing? Just like the butterflies.
Yeah.
Seeking their freedom. So, Jeff, the last thing I want to kind of, the main message I want to leave today is that empowerment is not something to strive for. Empowerment is a gift where we learn to be who we really are. It's a gift. We can't strive for it. It's like the butterflies. We can't strive to break out of that netting. But we as human beings who are so valued have been given a way to break out of the bondage that we create for ourselves and enter into the freedom that I'm talking about. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, and it's so, for me, it's so powerful because it's like all of this, just like with the butterflies, all of this stuff that we're always striving for, all this stuff we're trying so hard to get, these places that we're trying to find, to get to buy, to experience, all of these things are all already there. It's all already there, and all we have to do is experience what's already there.
It's all about acceptance, and I think, you know, if you want another piece of advice for people out there, it's learning to accept what is in the present moment. That's a hard one, because we live in such a tumultuous time. It's very hard to believe that all has a plan, all has a purpose, and we will never ever find our own purpose in life if we don't make that connection.
What a great note to end on. Graeme, thank you so much for sharing all of this great stuff. Not only today, but this is only the beginning of a podcast that's going to go on with awesome guests giving awesome lessons and teaching us everything that how they've used these ideas to make their lives better. I look forward to listening to more episodes. Graeme, where can we go to get more information about this podcast and the Be Empowered group?
Yeah, sure. Well, the first thing I'd ask the listeners, this is the first of many. The best thing you can do is leave a review for this on iTunes for this podcast, because the more popular the podcast becomes, the greater range or audience base that it's going to get out to. And this is a very important message on how to manage your energy. So also I have a book on Amazon. You can go directly to Amazon. That's called The Manifesto of Your Inspirational Mind. Or you can go to my website, www.beempoweredgroup.com, and download a free ebook there. It's called Know Your True Value and Worth. So we've talked enough about that today to hopefully inspire people to go there and download that free ebook.
Absolutely. And you don't have to write any of that stuff down, because it's going to be in the show notes below the show. If you're on iTunes, just go over to beempoweredgroup.com and you can get all of this information. And if you're on YouTube, you'll see it right below the video there. Graeme, thank you so much. I look forward to seeing, I know I'm subscribing to this podcast, and I know I'm going to leave a review. Thank you very much for this, and I can't wait to see what awesome things you do on this podcast in the future.
Hey, thanks so much for listening to the Be Empowered podcast. For more on regaining your power by bridging that gap between who you think you are right now and who you really are, go to www.beempoweredgroup.com and enter your name and email address to receive a free ebook and get notified of any upcoming podcasts. Remember, when you know and feel connected to your spiritual mind, you master your world. Changing your energy transforms your life.